minute to figure out how to, everybody else start coming in the room and everything. But as we see, there we go. We've got people coming in the room. Hello, everybody. We're just talking about travels that we want and travels that we're desiring and travels that we're doing as we move through the year. So we will just chat it up for a second while people are coming in the room. But welcome everybody. We are super excited. We're talking about AI and how it's going so far. One of the things I love, Emily, is that it just started automatically recording. So that saved the day because I would have forgotten and we would have been 15 minutes in and y'all would have had to repeat everything. Anyway, so welcome everybody. So glad you're here. This is such an exciting topic, right? It's one of the things that's the hot topic of the day. We're gonna take a stab at looking at it through a different lens, but also looking at everything that we're already doing. So we're calling it it's one of the next waves of change, right? So we're going to talk about what is the lay of the land today. We're going to share with you the landscape of the next iteration of this next iteration. And we have 2 Arizona school districts here today who will discuss the what and why and how of they are bringing AI into schools. They're both doing things a little differently. They have some similar questions and challenges at the beginning, and then how they're thinking as they are preparing to move into 24 and 25. We also have Mike Mitchell from Ethically, which is an AI tool that supports both educators and students by serving as a tool for teachers to offload some of those rote tasks, thus allowing more time for high value student facing activities. Also does some work with providing insights, which Mike will tell us about a little bit, and serving students as an always available helper to supplement teacher instruction and really working to build out the confidence and skills of them, specifically in the writing domain. So we have some takeaways. We want you to have a glimpse into what the districts are doing and looking for at this point, where they're going. We will share some specific steps on how to get started or move forward with your AR journey in your district, and then some tools and resources to support you as well. So diving in, I'll drop your LinkedIn bios as you all start talking in the chat. So we won't do a lot of extended time on introductions. So we're just going to dive right in. Mike, when we were doing our planning meeting, I thought you said something really cool, which was talking about, I think your words were, and I'm actually looking at my notes because I wrote them down. It's more of the same. It's like change with a different face, but it's definitely got some of the same, this isn't what you said, but some of the same undertones as other changes. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that to set the stage, lay the
Yeah,
foundation?
absolutely. And thank you again for inviting me to be part of this. I've been looking forward to this. It's funny, Laura. I just read a quote earlier today that I thought really, in my view, kind of sums up AI and kind of where we are, not just within education, but I just think in society. And
Yeah.
what the person said was that right now, I think you can kind of think of AI like an intern, or I think maybe for this audience, it's probably better to say maybe like a student teacher, in that, you can often an intern or student teacher can maybe show you how to do some things in a new way, or maybe be more efficient, or maybe even be better. But they also need guidance and scaffolding and support. And this person was kind of saying that's kind of where we are with AI. And I thought, yeah, I think that's kind of right. That's where we are. And so um, I think when districts think about AI right now, it's kind of the new thing and everybody's talking about it. But I think over the past several years, educators have done a really good job of thinking about and building out processes for how you bring new technology into the K-12 context.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of those rules have really changed. And so all the things that you have been thinking about with AI, does it align with your curriculum and does it further your curriculum goals? I think that still applies.
Yeah.
How does it handle student data privacy? I think that still applies, probably applies even more. So in a lot of ways, yeah, it's new, but in some ways it's really not. And so I would encourage districts to lean on all of the things you've already been doing when you vet new technology. AI is just the newest thing to kind of take through that process.
I like that because it brings some comfort to the idea, right? Because change can be like, it can be super scary. And so when we recognize that, yes, it's different, but there are similarities and we can apply skill sets that we already have, it takes away some of the fear and concern I think that different stakeholder groups involved in the process feel. We know that we have solid change management processes. We know we have solid ed tech protocols and that we've used them. You think BYOD, one-to-one, COVID, cybersecurity, everything. There's been so many changes. I've been in ed tech since 2008 and have, that was like the beginning of iPads coming in, and everything's just each time we run into the same questions, the same processes. And so you feel like we've got it, some good solid things under our belt by now. Diana and Emily, do you want to jump in and talk to us? Because I know that even though we've got that solid understanding, we also know there's a lot of fear and concerns out there. And as you jump in, will you just say who you are and where you're from? So for the few people that might not know you, because I figure everybody knows you.
You want to go,
But tell us
Emily?
about some of the fears and concerns, yeah, that are out there.
Sure, I'll start out. Yeah, my name is Emily Marshall. I am in the Vail School District, southeast of Tucson. I think the thing we always start with, and we like to say the least interesting thing about AI is the plagiarism piece. But that's really where we need to start, especially when we're working this into classrooms and talking to teachers. That's the first thing we need to address and talk about it and talk through it and kind of get everyone on the same playing field, the same kind of mindset, at least to where we all understand like this is where we're going. So then we can move on to the more interesting pieces and things that you can do with AI.
Yeah, because we hear that a lot, right? Sorry, Diana, but like that's the first thing I hear from teachers. They're like, well, they're gonna plagiarize, they're gonna copy, they're gonna pull work off the internet. And we heard that when we first brought devices into the classroom. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, they're just gonna, but I know we pick up anyway, we'll talk more about this, but things like AI voice, we learn about it. So yeah, I think that's one of the big things. I interrupted you, Diana. What were you going to say?
No, it's just, I was going to just add on to, I agree with Emily. So Diana Hawari, CIO, Dysart Unified School District. I agree that plagiarism is a big topic when it comes to AI, but as with any new implementation, there's always going to be a good and a bad. There's always going to be that risk. There's always going to be somebody who's not using it correctly, which we know is not a reason to not progress, right? So, and I had mentioned this in a previous meeting. It's ChatGPT is almost 2 years old. So it's time to pick a side. It's not and districts, I think we have a responsibility to our staff and our students at this point to have these discussions and maybe take the pin out of it and start talking about how we're going to utilize it. Whether you're not going to or you are, it's time to pick a side and move forward. I think that's important. I think it's important with the plagiarizing piece that if you start using it on your own and become comfortable with it, you can start recognizing it and the fear kind of goes away. Even if you're trying it in your personal life just to kind of get an idea of what it looks like, it's not hard to recognize a piece of, a paper that has been AI has been used to create. And once you start seeing it over and over, you start going, that's interesting. That doesn't sound like this student who I've known all year. And you can start asking those questions. But I think at this point, school districts need to really pick a side and start deciding if they're going to move forward or if they're not going to move forward or how they're going to use it. But we're at a point now where it's not new anymore.
Yeah.
It's out there and we need to decide.
I remember when my first year of teaching, I made the mistake. I was an English teacher and I made the mistake of having every class's papers due on the same day and promising that I'd have the grades back in like 4 days. I had like 200 students, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I remember reading that was my first takeaway as a first year teacher. But I remember reading one of the students' papers and I was like, oh, this is not this kid's voice. And so I had him read the paper back to me, and when he couldn't pronounce, I shouldn't have done it. It was I wasn't trying to shame him, but I was really trying to make the point. So that was a challenge back in 2004. And it's challenge in 2024. So wow, oh my gosh, that's been 20 years.
Mhm.
Oh, I don't even want to think about that. Oy. Okay, so yeah, Mike, what were you gonna say?
Well, just to kind of to piggyback on that a little bit, I think you can't let the fear stop you because there are so many good things that can come out of it. And, you know, if you look at a word processor, are there ways that students or frankly teachers could abuse that technology? Yeah, but they can also do a lot of really good, great things with it. And so I think that's the way we've got to kind of frame it. We were talking, Diana was talking about, picking a side, and I think in some ways the sides being picked for you, the genie is kind of out of the bottle a
Right.
little bit
Yeah.
on AI. And so I think it's really incumbent on everyone to think about how do you get your arms around it? And that may be different for staff and teachers than it is for students. I think we've got to think about audiences when we think about this technology, and just like again with every other tool, there are tools and technologies we make available to staff and teachers that we don't make available to students. I think
Yeah.
again, not to sound like a broken record, but I think the same rules apply here too.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Uh,
AI, even though like ChatGPT is fairly new, AI has been around. Like it's created to assist teachers with individualized learning, to minimize teacher necessary intervention, right? So it is embedded already in some softwares. That is AI. When a student goes to answer and the software says, okay, basically you got that wrong. So now you're going to get 5 questions just like it. So we can make sure you're mastering the content before you get the next question. But then the student next to them is on a whole different path because the system has realized, okay, they mastered this and they moved on. So that is AI already. That's already artificial intelligence. So this is just another aspect of it. It's another iteration of what's coming. So we are already using AI. It's just this is different.
mhm. Yeah. And I think when we talking for educators and for the general public, that'll probably come up later, but recognizing that where it already exists in our day-to-day life, I think that's a, really important thing to recognize where it's already happening. What other concerns? I know we've got the standard student data privacy. I know that's one of the ones that always comes up. What do you guys think about that in terms of AI? Is it different than it is for any of the other
No, it's the same. So
tools
when
that we bring up?
Mike was talking about the vetting process you have for any other applications, if you have that process in place, if you're already and if you're not, you need to be. You have those data agreements signed. You are vetting privacy policies. You're updating them. You're talking to vendors about specific data that they're storing. Where are they storing it? If you're making sure that you're not violating FERPA or COPPA or SIPA in some aspects. If you already have those processes in place, then this would be vetted. Any software that you're using would be vetted the same way. So the
Okay.
concern is, and the big concern was when ChatGPT hit, we don't know where everything's getting stored, and we can't control what's being entered into it. And you do have to create a login. And are you allowing your students to use your student login? Because if you are now, they've tied the district into whatever they're putting out there on some servers and we don't know where. So that is still a big concern. But there are other AI softwares that are built for K-12 and do have the student data privacy and FERPA regulations in place. And so it's like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are some ways to do it that are safe and you're still protecting your district. So as a CIO, my first thing is, are we going to get sued? I don't want the district to get sued, and I don't want it to be on my watch. So I'm always very protective of making sure we're policies in place, making sure we're communicating to parents, making sure we have all the background stuff first before we give out that information, because it does happen and it will happen and it will hit the news because AI is so hot right now. So I don't know if you want to be that district that gets on Channel 12. So that's what I mean. So it is important, very important.
Yeah. And
When I'm talking with educators, if they don't bring up student data privacy, I bring it up
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
I think it's that important. And so I would encourage you, as you're talking with vendors, hold them accountable to that. The reputable ones will have no problem, and
Right.
in fact will support. doing those kind of agreements, because it's very key. But Emily, I think I cut you off. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, because Diana has been a great leader in DICEART, not all districts are in the same place. And really post-COVID, a lot of districts are catching up right now. So if you're in a place where you don't have that really strong vetting policy, this is the perfect time to start putting into place, because we have all of the learning and the processes that districts like DICEART have done that we can steal from and put it into place. And now we have an on-ramp, because AI is so hot and people are so interested. That's like our on-ramp to like get these processes in place to make sure that we're being safe with our students' data.
Makes sense, because one of the big things people are concerned about or the question is like, where do I start? Like if they haven't already gotten started, and I know Diana had thoughts on if you haven't gotten started yet, that might be a little bit concerning. But if you haven't gotten started, and then even if you have, like, where do you go next? That's a question a lot of people have, because it's so overwhelming, right? And so,
And on the other side, if you're already allowing them to use AI, but you haven't put all those safety, in place, you still can. So it's not like we need to stop now, or we're already doing it, we're just going to do it. No, you can still backpedal and get the right policies and procedures and signatures that you need.
okay, so we don't have to like try to put the toothpaste back in the tube or
Right.
whatever. Yeah. And just,
But you just want to make sure, that you're progressing and that you're putting those precautions into place. It's not the end of the world, hopefully.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what kind of things are you all doing? I know we were supposed to have another guest here, and she is not here today, but we are going to, Laura Owens over at AzTEA. She's going to join us another time. We had a scheduling conflict. And I know they're doing some really great things. And so we'll be able to hear from her down the road. Emily and Diane, I know you guys, both of your districts have different stages and thoughts and things that you're doing as well. So does anybody want to dive in and just share out what you've done so far? And then I'm going to ask what you're thinking about for 24-25 too. So just to have that.
Go ahead, Emily.
Either.
You can go.
Okay. Yeah, we are working through a lot of, I guess, those foundational pieces to make sure that we're ready for things. I think everyone feels like they're either completely behind or they know that they're out in front using with students. So we have a really great teacher group that normally does curriculum work, learning about AI, investing in kind of that background knowledge, and starting to create trainings for our teachers. We're really excited to kind of lead with the teacher effort. And so it's not the district office saying, here's what you do. It's really coming from that teacher group. I think that's probably one of our biggest strengths right now. In the process, we have not started using it with students, although we do have a project kind of coming up soon that I think we'll talk about later, where we're going to be using AI with some of our high school students who receive special education services. So that's on the horizon for us.
I like that. Diana, what you got?
So right now we have it open for staff because we want them to get familiar with it. We have it blocked for students, but we are working on adding it to our policy 5305 about cheating. It's about the cheating, plagiarism, forgery, and just making sure that we are adding AI in that. Also adding it to our EIS agreement, because there's also statements regarding cheating, plagiarism, forgery. And I think we feel like that's a good fit for AI. So that's saying that we're not saying that you're not going to use AI, but you're not going to use it to plagiarize or to forge or to cheat. It'll be used as a tool to assist you, but we have it until we get all of that in place. We're not opening it up to students yet. So that's not to say that they're not using it on their own with their own personal accounts at home, which is why it's important that our staff is able to recognize when they're using it. So it's still not like, well, let's not deal with it till we open up to students. This is a time that DICEART's hoping to get people familiar with it so that when it does happen, and it will happen, just not yet, but it will, when it does happen, that they're able to recognize it. In talking to some of our English teachers, literature teachers, they have processes in place already. So AI kind of fits. So, you have to do a draft, and then you do a rough draft, and then you do a draft, and then you do it, this, show me your thought process. They want to see the process, and that alone helps to negate the use of AI, like, oh, here's my 5-page term paper that I did in 15 minutes. So at least they can see the process to build. And I know that that's built into a lot of curriculum because I know my kids have done the same thing. So even that is beneficial to prevent just complete 100% AI created documents.
Totally off the subject, but on the subject, you also have been some of your time saved because you're no longer needing to do some of the work for your hubby, right?
Yeah, well, so on the staff part, so I will say, and he's not on here, I hope he's not on here, but
I don't think he is. We're
yeah,
talking about him.
so
Hold on a second.
I spent years editing his emails and you know,
Yes, no.
presentations, and I don't have to do that anymore because he just runs it through and it comes up with, you know, verbiage that that helps him, and that's what it's for. It's not, he doesn't take it and copy it and paste it, because a lot of times if you really read it, it's kind of silly if you just do 100%, but it helps you to figure out a professional way to come across or get your point across. And just, you know, taking bits and pieces from here. It's a great starting point too, especially for those that have to do presentations that don't know where to start. It's nice to put it in and just get a starting point. It gets kind of the brain going, and it is beneficial. Um, and I think of it like, I remember in school, you know, and I'm dating myself, encyclopedias, right? So when we were in school, we never could have resources. The resources really weren't available unless we were going to thumb through, you know, A through L, you know, encyclopedia. And then as things got going with my kids, they were allowed to use the internet as a resource, because you know what, that's real life. Okay,
Right.
who doesn't do that? And so this is, again, just another iteration of something that's going to affect them in real life. And so they really need to know how to use it properly. It's not going to go away. It's just going to continue. So we do owe that to our staff and our students.
Absolutely. And remember when like your mom didn't have enough stamps to get the encyclopedia that you needed from
Yes.
the grocery store? I don't know if everybody remembers that. So
Yeah.
you'd have all of them except for the like, I think like M through P was more
Yeah.
expensive or more stamps than the rest. I
All
don't
my
know.
reports were A through L. If it didn't start with A through L, my reports did not get done. We didn't have
Just
the other half.
borrow
Can I,
from the neighbor
can,
if you could get it. Mike, sorry, Mike.
no, I want to piggyback on that because I think there's some really powerful stuff in there in that, if you look at a lot of kind of the consumer-based AI applications, a lot of it is very anchored in convenience and speed. And I think there is a place for that, but I don't know in a K-12 context that makes sense. We don't want students to not do the work themselves. I was a teacher, and maybe this is a little old school, but I think there's a lot of power in the struggle that you go through. That's where learning happens. And I don't think we want to rob students. Now, can AI or any technology scaffold that experience? Absolutely. But we want kids to struggle. I think that's where the learning happens. And I think as educators, that's what we've got to devise an AI environment that enables that without moving over into just doing the work for me.
And some
It's
of
a
the ethically
productive
tools.
struggle though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And knowing the teachers, I think that's where I know sometimes we hear like, oh, well, the teacher's going to be replaced or whatever. The teacher will never be replaced in that area because the teacher knows when their student is in productive struggle and when they're tipping over into frustration where they're not going to learn once they hit frustration point. They're just not. And so finding that perfect marriage between where the tools are coming into play to support, and I know Mike, I'm going to ask you about ethically because I know ethically has some tools that y'all are doing that support that process, but helping teachers to understand how the tools support the more rote aspects of the work and the support the autonomy of the student by offering them a always on tool. And again, Mike, I'm going to tip this over to you because I think I'm just giving you a nice segue into that part of the conversation because I think it's really cool. But Emily, do you agree with the productive struggle shift into frustration aspect? That's always going to be teacher focused, I think, right? I don't
Yeah,
know if an AI can
100%.
figure that out.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear what Mike has to say, but that's where our idea about using AI with our special education students at the high school level came from. is that they struggle, and it's not always productive struggle because we haven't given them the tools they need to make their work accessible. And yes, that's our job as educators, but we're also overworked in so many caseloads and things like that. So we're really excited to introduce AI tools to students that allows them to make their work more accessible, but also gives them tools that post-graduation will allow them independence and to reach their goals. And so once we started working on that project and I was looking for tools that protected student data privacy, I was really excited to talk to Mike and hear what Ethically is doing.
Like that.
Well, I want to give David Sanders in the chat a shout out because I think the point he put in the chat, if you're not following it, it is right on track in my opinion. And that, again, like when Google first kind of came on the scene, everybody had some of these same kind of worries and concerns, and we've kind of seen how that played out. So, David, I think I am validating for what it's worth what you are saying in the chat. I think it's right on track, but that's really, ethically, our initial focus is on written expression and helping students to become better writers. And so our view is that if you kind of boil it all the way down, what writing really is, it's the way you communicate your thinking. And writing is really a reflection of your thinking. And so when we're building and developing good writers, what we're really doing there is building good thinkers and developing thinking skills. And so that's the approach we're trying to take. And so again, our AI, it will not do the work for a student, but Diana, I think it was maybe you who mentioned that, kind of that blank screen, that can be so daunting. In fact, there's a word for that. It's called scriptophobia, is the fear of the blank page or the blank screen. And so if we can maybe help students kind of get over that initial hump and help them kind of do some brainstorming, that's really our focus. And then once we can get them going, they can do the writing. And then on the teacher side, um, you know, Laura, as you mentioned, when you've got like 200, 300 papers that you need to grade, our AI tool, will do an initial pass, and based on the rubric that you've provided, it will try to give you some suggested feedback. But again, we don't want to replace the teacher, so the teacher always has the control over what final feedback goes to the student. So I guess what we're trying to do is use AI to augment the experience, but not replace the experience. And I would encourage people, as you're looking at AI in a K-12 context, to think about it in those terms. Is it augmenting versus is it replacing? And David will probably in the chat say that much better than I just did, and I will look forward to reading that when he does.
I thought you did a pretty good job, huh? I think he's got it. I think Mike knows a thing or two about what he's doing here. And we did talk about, one of the things we talked about in the planning meeting is the different, maybe differentiation's the wrong word. Diana, Emily, you guys can set me straight where I'm going here, but talking about that we do have different stakeholder groups and different audiences that we're working with. And when we talk about, when I used to talk to teachers, and we're not talking about AI because I'm not a coach, I'm not working in districts as a coach anymore, but it sounds like I'm expecting that it's a very similar conversation to what it was when it was one-to-one devices, when it was, everything, security, everything, COVID, the things that we did there. And it was really three things always came up. Was one, educators had that desire for autonomy. They're like, it's my classroom, I do this, I know what my kids need, and now you're coming from district and telling me what I need to do. And we really want to be able to, we as teachers, we want to be able to decide when and how the tools are coming into play. And that's not always possible, but how can they get the most autonomy possible and the most opportunity to integrate in the way they want? So I know that comes up after the fact support, right? Because a lot of times, and I've been in professional development for years, we are resourced to provide that initial level of support, but after the fact, we don't always have the time, the resources, or the availability to provide that ongoing support, which we always want and need. And then, just the time to get everybody used to it. So I know, so those are some of the concerns that come up with any integration. And I know IT, from IT side, we have a totally different focus, right? Even though all of those things are absolutely true, we're also coming from the IT side, which is a lot bigger picture, right? Diana, you can
Right.
dive
So
into that.
we're very much about, we want to provide the tools that are going to make life easier in the classroom and make learning easier. But I believe me, I know it's overwhelming for teachers. Every year things change, applications change, processes change. We're going to try this now. We're going to try that now. It seems like a lot. And so I understand when something new is brought to the surface, it's like, oh my gosh, now I have another thing that I need to learn. And
Right.
we are already, I know that teachers are already, there's so much expectation in a small amount of time. The year goes by so fast, and you might have, people might think they have the kids all day. It's a small amount of time. And if things are missed, it's gone. It's not like you can get that time back. It's not like I could say, oh, I'll go back 3 months and take care of that. You're moving on because you have to keep going. So with AI, I honestly feel like this is a tool that will eventually help teachers to get more time because it's going to take some of that intervention time. It's impossible to expect each teacher to sit down individually with each student and give them exactly everything they need every single day so that student can be successful. I mean, some students get it, and then there's those that just they take a little bit extra, and there's no extra time allowed for that. It's impossible. It's not built into, you can't. It's just impossible. So I honestly feel that there are some tools that if we could just get them out and get the right training and get the fear away, that eventually, like anything else, we look back and go, how did we ever survive without that?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that's where we're at right now. Is it's just another thing that's added. But I do feel like this is something that could really save time and help the
Yeah.
teachers and help the students.
I think additionally, part of the problem, I think maybe the fear in teachers' minds is the major shift in instruction and methods that needs to take place when we have students using it. That plagiarism piece is really big, and it's not unfounded because it's going to require a big shift, right? And it's the shift that we've been trying to talk about with EdTech standards and things like that, but it's a shift. And so it's not just the new tool or the training, it's also the level of groundwork that people need to do to make that shift.
It's
One of
shifting
the
an entire culture. Yeah. Sorry, Mike.
Right.
one of the areas I'm actually really excited about with AI is that I think it does have potential to really help drive equity in the classroom and address learner variability in ways that, again, Diana was kind of alluding to this, that teachers just haven't had the bandwidth to do before. One of the things we're trying to do is develop feedback that is truly based on the rubric for students so that we can hopefully reduce the bias that may be in student evaluation of work. Because one of the nice things about AI is it doesn't have preconceived notions necessarily about what a student can or cannot do. It's going to purely look at the rubric that's provided and offer recommendations based on that. And I think there's even a professional development aspect to that, that if I as a teacher can see models of that kind of evaluation, I think that can raise up our game in that area and drive equity. So that's an area I'm really actually excited that we can do.
Interested in the idea of eliminating or reducing bias. Now, would we consider the AI to have any sort of bias? Could it possibly be built into it by, can you talk to that a little bit and how we avoid that, or
Yeah, well,
what we should help our teachers be aware of?
yeah, I think it can. And that's where I think maybe not necessarily teachers, but people maybe at a district level need to really look at what is the model that is underlying the AI, because that's really key. That's where that bias is going to either be there or not be there.
Yeah,
Um, but so I do think that is something to look at. It's again, I think it's like any technology, it kind of comes down to garbage in, garbage out. And so if
right.
the model that the AI is trained on has deficiencies, then the output is going to have those same deficiencies. And so that's where I think decision makers, really the people on this call, as you're looking at AI solutions, in addition to like the bells and whistles and all of the kind of the user experience, you should be asking questions about what is the underlying model, the language model that AI is based on, because that's where it's either going to drive equity or it's going to perpetuate stereotypes and things like that. I think that's the key to solving that.
Yeah. And as we talk in a little bit about some solutions, we could help people with getting direction to where to go to find those resources. Yeah, because they already exist and we're seeing a lot of it. So, so why reinvent the wheel? So Emily, did you want to talk a little bit about the special ed project that you're working on, or is that
Yeah, I mean, just a quick
like just
overview. I mentioned it a
yeah,
little bit.
and why
Um,
ethically and AI came into the idea a little bit more?
yeah,
I
so
just think it's cool.
I'm doing this for a project that I'm doing through CoSIN, but I have a personal connection to this because I've been using AI in little ways with my son, who struggles in ninth grade, and kids feel dumb and different and all that stuff. And so I just found that I could give him an AI tool that would empower him to modify the work so that it was more accessible and it would allow him to do the learning he needed to do. And I just thought that could be a really cool way, both in high school now and post graduation, when kids go off on their own, they have this tool that's, like you said, it's going to be there's lots of free tools that will allow you to do things that maybe you struggled with on your own. And so that's kind of the project we're in. We're working on surveying our students to see what they struggle with and what they want help with, so that we can choose the AI tools that we can, kind of customize for each kid. And then we're hoping kind of March and April timeframe, we'll be able to implement that with one of our high schools. And hopefully learn a lot of lessons. Like Diana said, I'm sure next year or soon we'll be using AI with all of our students. And so we're just hoping to learn a lot and have some good, I guess, a good starting place as we expand that out more.
Mike, I know that when you approach districts and talk to them, we talk about, and most of us know it, like, the walled garden approach, and what are the kind of fundamentals that you see districts wanting and that you ensure that they know that they want, or maybe they don't want? Do you have some guiding principles that you share?
Yeah, the walled
And
garden, I think, is a really key that you, especially for anything that is going to be something students experience. I think you want that to be a safe experience. And so again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but that's no different than I think any other technology. You want to make sure it's an appropriate thing in a K-12 context, especially in a student context. And so I think walled garden is part of that. Data privacy obviously is a key part of that. And then as I mentioned just a minute ago, really, making sure that the model that things are based on is is as free from bias as you can. I think those are really key things related to AI that people should be looking at. What as I work with districts really all over the country, and frankly now we're starting to see interest all over the world. Many of them are doing some kind of a pilot, very similar to kind of what Emily is doing, is taking either a cohort of teachers or one specific program and beginning to kind of test the waters, but again, doing it in a very controlled way, because you're going to make mistakes. I mean, that's just human nature. Things are, you're going to learn lessons. That's part of how we learn lessons. But I think you want to take some baby steps in that regard. And so I think if you do it in a pilot or something like that, that's kind of a safe way to do it. And then I think Diana mentioned earlier a really key thing that a lot of people are taking a look at, codes of conduct and the student handbook and making sure that those are getting updated to reflect, the AI world. Because again, a lot of them, those types of things, they do mention plagiarism or academic honesty, but they may need to be tweaked a little bit and updated to further reflect how technology plays a role in that now, that maybe you didn't have to be as concise on that in the past. So I think looking at all those kind of things across the district is really key too.
now's about the time that we should be starting to think about that, right? For 24, 25? Is that right?
Yes, ideally. So ideally, the more work we do at the district level, the more work we do with the district administrators, with cabinet. Um, as long as we can get that background, it's going to be easier to roll it out into the classroom because it's not the unknown. At least we'd have a process done. At least we know we've done our due diligence to make sure it's safe. And then, then the teachers and the students can take over at that point, knowing that it's a safe environment, or at least it's a safe, there's always going to be somebody that's going to try to change things or try to, there's bad actors and there's people that's what they do for a living. And so there's always that. So we're never going to get to like, oh, we're done. So, but I think if we do our, due diligence at our level, it'll make it a better experience in the classroom, and it won't be so, hopefully, so frightening or overwhelming, and it can be a positive experience.
So some people have said, and I know we've talked about it, where we say that it's such a big conversation that we taking the students out of the conversation at first. You know what I mean? And focusing on our staff. And we've talked about some schools have gone past that, districts have gone past that already, and they already have access for students available. And for those who haven't yet, is it possible to focus on our staff and have our kiddos kind of wait? Or do we feel like we need to be supporting everybody in this at the same time? Is it a, go slow to go fast type thing? Go slow to go fast down the road, or I don't know. What do y'all think? Let's dive in.
I think it probably depends on where you're at right now. I don't know what Diana was gonna say, but
Sure.
if you're at a point like, a lot of our schools are, where you have a vetting process and you have the foundation laid, maybe you can move faster. I think if you don't have that foundation in place, it's probably more dangerous to try to jump in with student use. Not that you can wait forever. You can't wait a year or 2 years or 3 years, but you have to, get everyone on board, get that foundational pieces in place, and like get moving. You can't keep waiting.
Right. If you're not having that data governance discussion yet, I mean, that has to take place first. Those discussions with your cabinet, with your superintendent, making sure that everybody's on board. That's really, in a perfect world, that's the way it should start. Not everybody, has started that way. So it's not the end of the world. You can always go back and fix it while it's progressing. But ideally, yeah, you need to have all those vetting processes in place. And that's what we're here for too, is AzTEA CoSN, we have those resources. So anybody who does not have those, we want to share everything. We'll share our experiences, we'll share our forms, our data agreements. I've shared Dysart's data agreement all over Arizona. And the process of how we started and where the data agreements are kept and all of that. So nobody really has to reinvent the wheel at this point with so many districts that do have a process in place. Just reach out, because we will share. We want to share.
That whole breaking down the silo, stop the silo.
Yes.
Keep saying that we really want to support each other. Do you think there might be some hesitation on the part of some districts to, like, is there a sense of nervousness, like if you haven't, gotten into it yet, like it feels like it's too late? Kind of like when you meet somebody and you don't know their name, but by the 5th time you've seen them, you can't ask them what their name is because it's too late. Like, is it like that, where if a district hasn't, already have all the agreements and everything in place, are they going to feel like they're like uncomfortable at sharing that, do you think? And if so, how do we avoid that?
I would hope not. I would hope that as much talking as we've done over the last year and a half,
Yep.
that they would feel comfortable enough to reach out or to say something. I really would hope that it's not so overwhelming that you just want to, pull the covers over your head and hope it goes away, because it's not going to go away. So, and like I said, even if you are allowing it, but you don't have a vetting process, it's not too late to get it. You need to get it. So, and you don't have to reinvent anything, so definitely I just hope that, and that's what we've been trying to do with CoSN and AzTEA and getting the word out, is that's what CoSN's here for, that's what AzTEA is here for, that's why we're all here once a month, to make sure that we're approachable And if we don't have the resources, we can maybe find somebody that does to help you. So
Well, and what about this came to mind as you were talking, but what about the monthly CIO CTO chats that you host?
yeah,
Is that a
so
great,
yeah,
I don't even know if everybody knows about it.
that's great. So once a month, we host a CIO CTO chat, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a bunch of CIO CTOs, ed tech leaders. There's also a Zoom option if you can't make it. And we just sit around for an hour and a half and talk about our challenges and what we are all facing and how can we help each other. And I have gotten so much good information from those meetings that we take back and we start implementing. And if we run into trouble, then we reach out and ask again. So what did you guys do? How did you do? Everybody has something positive to share. And if you need support, then that's the place to do it. I mean, just trying to keep that, the days of us working in those silos and being very secretive about everything we're doing in IT is
Yes.
not helping our Arizona kids. It's not helping Arizona as a state when it comes to education. So it's very important that we are helping each other because we all have the same goal. We all have the same requirements, and it's time to open the doors and start working together.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think you're starting to see even some states at the DOE level starting to offer guidance. North Carolina just released some
Yeah.
really good guidance for districts around AI. And again, they wrote that and developed that for North Carolina districts, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's probably a lot in that document that Arizona districts could
Right.
leverage as well. So, they've published that it's available. There are a couple of other states that have done that too. And so, yeah, you're not alone. There are lots of people asking these questions. And so I think if you ask, you'll find all kinds of good stuff out there.
Utah is great for student data privacy. Oh my gosh, they have a whole department, and we have talked to them. We have used their stuff. They have videos about explaining FERPA that are hilarious. I mean, we have borrowed a lot of things from Utah. So
They do.
Another
I'm
thing I'd
looking at
add that I don't think we've quite addressed is one of the things I see is there's districts out in front of this. We're also, as educators, used to knowing, 40 steps ahead of us. We're the chess players that know every move that's going to happen. And I think with AI, for a lot of people, you don't know more than 2 or 3 steps out ahead of you. And so it's freezing people. But it's really important to jump in and talk, even if it's like we're going to start talking and we're going to talk to everybody in this district, and we're going to talk to administrators and principals and teachers, you have to start regardless of where you're at, even if you don't know how you're going to get to student use.
right, it's time.
Yeah. Like the head in the sand approach isn't gonna work, even though there's so much to prioritize. This has to bubble up as to. Leanne likes your chess analogy, Emily.
Yeah.
That's good.
The other thing that I heard yesterday in a meeting, sorry, if you're the person in your district that sees like we need to do this, this, and this, and people aren't listening to you, it was really interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday, and this person told me when you're innovating something new, like you see dots that other people don't even know exist. And she's like, it's frustrating, and you like see it so clearly, and they're ignoring what you're saying, but you see those dots that no one else or other people don't know exist. So she's like, you need to see the dots, and then you need to connect the dots for them, and then you need to show them, highlight the big picture, and then let them ask questions because they're not seeing those dots yet. So you're just too far ahead of them.
I love that. I love that.
I know, I do too. We have about 10 minutes. What are we missing in chat? I know, Emily, you've been having a conversation in there and I've been trying to keep up, but I haven't done a very good job. What kind of stuff's going on in there that we need to or want to talk about before we start to move to wrap up?
Yeah, we've been going back and forth. Roxy just had such a great point in that, if basically to Diana's point where schools either have to choose to be on board or not. But her point is saying like schools don't necessarily have that choice because if you're in a district and you choose not to move forward and like get this high quality PD and use it with students, those students are at a disadvantage from students that have access outside of school and also from students that have access inside of school. So we're going to widen those equity gaps if we don't move forward in a really high quality way.
It's here. It's not going away.
It's here. Yeah. And I think we're lucky the AD has been so supportive with so many things that like that's a good resource. We were talking about the state resources that have been put out, but sharing resources and working together to make sure if you're in a district that's really small and the person that IT also teaches technology, you have
Yeah.
the same access to resources that a bigger district would have.
On the under resources, smaller districts, the ones who, like you said, are the, doing everything and manage it. There's one person managing IT and covering the front desk so that, somebody can go on lunch. I think, Diana, you mentioned this, like the smaller schools are like, well, we're small, there's no risk to nobody's gonna be looking at us for like student data privacy concerns and stuff like that. But there's really genuinely a greater concern there because it's a known factor that there's going to be fewer protocols in place because, and fewer protections in place. And so student data exposure, it's like picking up dollars off the ground instead of going for, robbing the bank. You know what I mean? That's a horrible analogy or metaphor that I just used, but I think it's similar. You know what I mean? It does have that thing. So how do we make sure that we're supporting the smalls who may not even know that this is something truly, that this is something. Go ahead.
The other thing that came up that I just want to highlight, because we have at one point said, if you can't work with students, you got to start with teachers. But ultimately, we are in education. And I've several times said I'm hopeful that AI is the catalyst that really moves everyone forward with the vetting data privacy piece. But Leanne mentioned the student-centered empowered learning, and it's the exact same thing, right? Like this is going to require a shift to that student-centered learning. And hopefully we can embrace it and meet those challenges and use it to move all of those things forward and really give kids the education they deserve.
Yeah. Each time we come into it, there's more and more that is moving in that direction. This is yet another piece. And so we have to bring everybody forward. Leanne was talking about, I don't know what you guys said, but asking about administrator training. Like what kind of offering, we talk about teachers, we talk about IT, but what's happening in the area of getting our admins trained up? And because you're leading while learning, right? As everybody, but as an admin especially, you're figuring it out as you go. So what were you going to say on that, Emily?
That's actually perfect, coming back to the dots that other people don't even see exist for administrators who have 9 million things on their plate. We found that some people were just hadn't experienced it at all. So we did some specific training, and it was a basic overview of AI, but then it was just giving them tasks where they logged in. We had everybody log into ChatGPT and had tasks for them to do, and really just that exposure and to see the power of it on your own was a really quick shift from indifference to when can I train my teachers and how do we start? Because people immediately see the power once they experience it themselves.
And that's what it's the fear of the unknown. So yes, if you can get them to log in, even if you're all in the same room and have them try it, and then that fear kind of subsides, and then they start saying like, okay, I can see this, I can see how this is going to work. And but it's I will say, from people I've talked to, 80% have never even looked at AI. Like they don't want to even check it. So giving them a safe space to do it in where they feel safe is great. I mean, that's a great idea, Emily, because that's how they see that they don't need to be as afraid of it as the news makes it out to be.
You get them past the fear, teach them a little bit, and then you scare them again so that they don't go too far.
Yes, exactly.
Don't get too comfortable. We are
be
coming
comfortable,
up
but be aware.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it. Mike, was I interrupting you? Are you good?
No, well, I mean, one other thing that I think people need to think about with respect to generative AI in particular is, as you're looking at those tools where it can, create the image for you and all of that, I think there are some really cool applications probably for that in an educational context, but you need to make sure you're looking at the terms and conditions of those places. The big question I would ask is, if I generate something or my students generate a piece of artwork in some of those tools, who actually owns that artwork? Does the student own that artwork? That's who I would argue should own it because they helped create it through the prompt. But I think that's another thing to really kind of take a look at is ownership of things that are developed in AI. And you want to make sure that whatever company isn't going to claim ownership, because I just don't think that's appropriate.
Good point.
And as we come to 254, moving into 255, we're going to move into final thoughts. So, like, what are our big thoughts as we start to wrap up? And then if you have big thoughts in the chat, if you want to drop in your final big thought as well, we have a lot, and we have a lot more to talk about still. I have my question that we didn't get to that that's on my mind is, how do we support our teachers who get excited about it? And there's all these tools out there and they're like, oh, we have so many and I got this and I got that. How do we help them to understand how to vet? And if you don't if you have that solid vetting process in place, then great, send them through that and make sure that any little iterations that we need to make are great. But if you don't have it, we want to encourage, how do we find that balance between encouraging exploration of new tools and shutting it down and saying, no, we can't, we got it. We're not going to do that because we're going to be safe. But anyway, that's another conversation for another time. So who wants to go first with their final thoughts on the day? Dun,
I'll
dun,
go
dun.
since I was trying to like, what's my big thought? And then Roxy pointed out, things like what are superintendents in the state doing? So my big thought is that I feel like the work is leading to us to connect to other groups. Like, we were talking about trying to connect with the superintendent's professional organization and things like that to continue the conversation between groups in different positions so that we can work together and kind of streamline, get our arrows aligned so we're working together.
COSIN has a superintendent path that is very beneficial to superintendents, and also part of the CEDL training is making sure that you are getting your seat at the table or getting your voice heard in cabinet. So whether you are allowed in cabinet or whether your superior goes to cabinet, somebody who has that superintendent's ears where you need to be talking their ear off, and making sure that what you need to be brought to cabinet is getting there. So getting your voice out there is important. Because without that, then the superintendent's got so many things going on, so we just need to make sure that these points are getting across, that this is coming and we need to discuss it, and we need to make sure that we're getting processes in place. But you got to have the support from your superintendent and your cabinet, else you're not going to be able to do anything. So it's a fight sometimes, but you just have to keep doing it and keep doing it. The fear is there, but the fear is in any technology. There's always a fear. Somebody's always going to use it for nefarious reasons. I mean, there's always bad actors, but that's not the reason to not do it. But definitely get your voice at the table where it needs to be.
Mike, what about you? What have we missed? What do you have to share?
Well, not that we
thoughts.
missed, but just to underscore, I think kind of the through line of a lot of what we've talked about today is I don't think you can let fear be the thing that stops you. And even if you're taking a baby step, and maybe it's not even a full baby step, but that's still progress, and you should celebrate that and then get up the nerve to take another baby step. And so, denial is not a strategy, so you got to do something. And I think if you're doing something, you're moving in the right direction.
And I think that having representatives or representation from the different stakeholder groups involved, which we know, but it's not always easy to do, right? Because sometimes we're having to move quickly, and but also having a central point, which is somebody who can understand the lens, hear the voice of the student, include the student, the teacher, the student, the community, the admin, the superintendent, the CTO, like somebody who can really coordinate all of those and understand where everybody's coming from, so that we're not missing anybody, and also so that everybody feels like they're a part of the process, and it's not just a push down from district. It's not a super organic thing at a site level. Again, to tie all the way back to what Mike said at the beginning, the same thing that's happened, right? These are the same things that we've been saying forever, and we want to make sure that everybody's involved. So that's what I've got.
And with any implementation, find your champions. There's champions. There's people that
Yes.
love it and they want it. And find those people, because they bring that excitement to the classrooms, to the teachers, and get them in front of groups. And it works.
Yeah. And your canary in the coal mine, your canaries too. You want a canary and a champion.
Yeah, yes.
I think for sure. So we are at 2:59. We managed to do everything in 59 minutes. I think that's pretty cool. Thank you everybody for joining us. We just landed at exactly 3 o'clock. We're going to say thank you to Mike for joining us. Emily and
Thank you so
Diana
much.
and I are here pretty much every month. We got, everything that we got to talk about. Thank you, all of our lovely guests and attendees today. The recording will be posted on the site by tomorrow, and we will just continue the conversation a little bit informally right now. I'm going to stop the recording, but as a formal, thank you everybody for being here today. And we look forward to next month when we will continue this every third Thursday, 2 o'clock, afternoons with AzTEA. Awesome. Thank you. And
Okay.